Most of you are probably familiar with the game telephone. One by one, participants whisper a message to the person next to them all the way down the line. The message inevitably gets jumbled a bit with each telling, so that by the time the last person shares the message out loud, it sounds nothing like what the first person had said. Hilarity ensues. When I used to play this game as a child, my own contributions to the degradation of the message were the result of not being a particularly clear enunciator while whispering between giggles. If I were to play today, I'd probably be even worse at the game than I was as a kid, only now the cause would most likely be brain fog, preventing me from remembering the message for long enough to relay it to the next person. This morning, we get to hear something as close to the original message of the resurrection as there is. John's gospel was written about 50 years after Jesus' death, so the story has been through a few rounds of telephone already, but it's still over 1,900 years closer to the event than we are. The setting is Easter evening. Just that morning, Mary Magdalene had been at the tomb, weeping and mourning, when the risen Jesus appeared to her. And now, just hours later, the disciples are huddled together in a house, hiding in fear of retribution from religious leaders for being followers of Jesus. Despite the locked doors, Jesus again shows up. Jesus speaks to the disciples, but it is only after he shows them his hands and his side, the parts of his body that were mortally wounded just a few days prior, that the disciples recognize him. They recognize him by his wounds. And then, upon realizing that their friend is truly alive again, the disciples rejoice. Thomas, however, is not there for some reason. Maybe he was hiding elsewhere, or maybe he found a place to be alone in his grief. He does later meet up with his fellow disciples, and they immediately tell him what a shocking scene he missed. Thomas wants a real, tangible interaction with Jesus too. He wants to touch the wound in Jesus' side. He wants to feel, to experience, to participate in this incredible resurrection. Maybe that's the only way he can overcome the shock of all that has happened over the last few days. And my favorite part of the story is that Jesus gets it. He shows up again, knowing Thomas wants to see him. Jesus invites Thomas's touch, as if to say, "Come and see." And their encounter is what makes it possible for Thomas to proclaim, "My Lord and my God." Note that there is no shame in any of these exchanges. Jesus' disciples don't hide their sense of confusion and awe. Jesus doesn't hide the visible signs of the horror he has just been through. It's only as the resurrection makes its way down the line, the message crossing centuries and centuries, that the tale gets twisted. For one, Thomas eventually gets the unfortunate moniker of doubting Thomas. To be clear, there is nothing wrong with doubt. Doubt helps us engage meaningfully and honestly with our faith. It is a vital part of our spiritual development. But even if the name Doubting Thomas were being used as a compliment, and it's not, but it's still not an appropriate name for him. Thomas isn't doubting so much as he is expressing a desire to be part of this incredible thing God has done. And the far more egregious error that developed in the retelling of the resurrection account is the mistaken message that new life is shiny and pretty. The version of the resurrection that we see today, as depicted in artistic renderings, includes a polished Jesus, glowing and radiant, with not a hair out of place. The scene is always sunny, and the bystander angels and disciples are bowing in peaceful reverence. This is the Instagram version of the risen Jesus, highly edited, beautifully filtered. Somehow the resurrection message evolved from wounded and doubtful to pristine and undeniable. And the problem with this version of the resurrection isn't that it's inaccurate. Inaccuracies are fine when we're playing a game and having fun. The problem with this version of the resurrection comes from what we are left believing about our own participation in the new life that God offers. Because if resurrection looks like perfection that should not be questioned, if unwavering beauty and shimmer are the indicators of the risen life, then are those of us who live in places of shadow not part of what God has done? Am I, messy, imperfect, struggling, doubting follower of Jesus, no longer welcome in this scene? Does resurrection have anything to offer my experiences of failure, of pain, of brokenness? Jesus didn't come to us, die for us, and rise among us in order to set so high a standard for our lives that none of us can reach him or touch him. It's just the opposite. Jesus embraced this extremely imperfect world of ours and went so far as to carry the wounds of this life with him into the next life. It's as if he's saying to those who are wounded, who are scarred, who bear the marks of struggle, that they are exactly for whom he now lives. That's the message we receive and are called to pass on in this centuries-long game of telephone. Being Easter people means recognizing the risen Jesus' presence with people and in places where his undying love is most profoundly needed. Sometimes those people and places will deeply challenge us because we won't want to see Christ there. Seeing Jesus in those who suffer, who are marginalized, who struggle, may force us to change our own behaviors and actions in response. But even when it's hard to do so, we pass along the message of resurrection. That's what we do. And we won't always do this perfectly or wholeheartedly, and that's okay. The risen Christ will keep showing up anyway. We who doubt and we who believe, we who struggle and we who serve others who struggle, we who yearn to tell the story, and we who wish it was still someone else's turn, all of us participate in this new and glorious Easter life. Alleluia.